SEC Media Days, day number 4, and the best day yet in covering the SEC here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate y'all stopping by for an afternoon swing through the SEC. Media Days concluding in Nashville for the very first time in the country music capital of the world. I almost called it Music City, but the country music capital of the world, I believe, fits. We've got some interesting stories to share from our pursuit of Big Ten media credentials. Check out my Twitter feed. But let's talk the SEC. That's why we're here, the best conference in America. We've got Chris Phillips joining from the Spurs Show and the League.
Mark, what's going on, man? It's a pleasure. I'm sitting right now on Radio Row. Day is wrapped up. SEC Media Days is wrapped up, man. I appreciate you having me on. It's a pleasure to chat.
Thank you. This is your first stop through the SEC Media Days. It was the first time in Nashville. What are your general impressions of the event?
You know, it went better than I even could have expected. You know, obviously the opportunity to ask questions to coaches, to players, what have you. But, you know, really, truly, Mark, what stood out to me about SEC Media Days was the opportunity to share space with so many talented creators, truly the upper echelon of those, I feel, in the college football space. I mean, you can think of basically college football Twitter in one room. So it was really cool to just collaborate and meet so many people that I'd had on the show previously that maybe I'd never met in person, and also meet new people and meet new connections. And like I mentioned, just share space with, you know, so many talented folks in the space was a really, really fun and unique thing. And I'm looking forward to doing it more in the future.
It is a fun time, and absolutely, I've experienced it 7 times. It wasn't the great, grand event that it is now, but still a great event at the time. And yeah, absolutely. So maybe we'll make it on back at some point. So before we get to your beloved South Carolina Gamecocks, your impressions looking across the league, the people, the players, the coaches that you got to talk to for those rival teams, maybe giving you a perspective that you didn't have before.
Well, you know, you start with the student athletes, because that's really what it should be about with SEC Media Days. So many fantastic student athletes that are highlighted for their accomplishments off the field, and of course the people they are as well. So, you know, getting to talk to KJ Jefferson, there was one that really stood out, the Arkansas quarterback, a guy that I ranked #1 in my preseason SEC quarterback rankings. Rocket Sanders as well. Also, you know, the guys from Florida, Missouri. You talk about, you know, moving to the coaches. Kirby Smart stood out to me. I mean, that was obviously one of our top storylines, one of the week. How would he handle everything off the field? And, you know, I thought for the most part, Kirby, it was softball questions a bit. You know, nobody really wanted to, you know, challenge anything that's going on in Athens at Georgia. And of course, we saw yesterday the AJC, all the deal with that and the way that's all went down. But, you know, Kirby Smart kept it very football, you know, talking about the chip on their shoulder and wanting to go 3 in a row and better never rest, right? The mantra for Georgia in 2023. And of course, there was Nick Saban. That's the first time I've ever been in a room with Nick Saban. And it's a different vibe, right? The energy is different. You can just tell all eyes and ears are on Nick Saban because he is truly the GOAT when it comes to college football. And I thought it was interesting. He was almost, I don't want to say he was trying to temper expectations, but, you know, just talking about, you know, we don't let the outside narrative dictate our expectations. And we all know what the expectations are for Alabama, right? The standard. It's college football playoff and national championship or bust. You know, there were many intriguing storylines that, Mark, you go back to day 1 at LSU, and, you know, it came off to me as a very confident Tigers football team. They should be. They're my team to win the SEC West. You know, you go to Mark Stoops and their improved physicality in both lines of scrimmage, and Devin Leary, and got to ask Coach Stoops a question about, you know, that wide receiver unit. They're a team. You know, I think I may feel better on Kentucky after hearing what Mark Stoops had to say and kind of looking over their roster again. And then, you know, Billy Napier addressing his quarterback situation and, you know, a pivotal year 2 in Gainesville. And I thought he, you know, addressed everything best he could. And it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out in year 2 of his tenure. But, and of course, it culminated with the Gamecocks today and then Josh Heupel. And, you know, Lane Kiffin this morning, Mark, I wanted to pull my hair out because for 20 straight minutes and really the entire time he was in the main room, all it was NIL. And I'm like, you have this opportunity to talk football with this guy. Ole Miss has got one of the best quarterback rooms, if not the best quarterback room in college football, and nobody wants to talk about it. I get it from the national media perspective. You want to talk about things like portal and NIL because they move the needle, but Mark, I don't know, man. I'm just wired the way I like to talk football and talk about things that are actually on the field and matter for the season. And so it was a lot of that this week, though. And so the opportunity again to ask questions and to hear from these coaches, it truly, really is the unofficial kickoff of the season.
Yeah, for those of us like you and I that talk college football the entire year, we got our fill of NIL and transfer portal. And then this for us seems to be the kickoff to the season. Okay, football. We're talking football now. Let's get on with it. But I hear you. That said, I'm still going to drag us back to an off-field issue and Kirby Smart because you're telling me that nobody held his feet to the fire. I saw the speech from the podium, and he seemed to be without addressing the issues, talking leadership, talking accountability, talking all those good tenets of a college football team, but not addressing, of course, the issues themselves. So even in a subtle way, nobody really addressed that in regards to trying to get an answer out of him.
Well, yeah, Mark, Pat Forty asked one question about the speeding issues and what they need to do to get that fixed. I mean, other than that, though, I thought there would be more. I thought there would be more. What I quickly realized, too, Mark, is it's one thing, I had people texting me, tweeting me, like, you should ask this, you should ask that, you should hold people accountable. When you're sitting in that room with the person and you're staring them in the, between the eyes, it is a lot different to stand up there and hold a microphone and try to grill somebody and, hold them to the fire, as you said, and ask that question. I'm still surprised it didn't happen. Because it's obviously, it's very obvious that Kirby Smart wants to talk football, right? That's all he wants to talk about, which I totally understand. And, he talked a little bit about his culture and, the buy-in they have and the results on the field, and they reflect the great culture that they do have. But, 2 people died, right? And so I don't know. I feel like, Mark, as much as I'm sure rivals of Georgia want to keep this thing afloat and keep this thing alive, and I think in 2 weeks when fall camp starts, Mark, we're not going to hear another word about this. I think this is going to go away. I think Georgia's going to focus on the field. Everything's going to go from, the speeding to, okay, let's get Carson Beck ready to play football. That's what it's going to go to. So whether that's right, wrong, and different, I think that's just the reality, because at the end of the day, Mark, as well as I do, fans can say they care about all this stuff off the field. They don't. They care about on the field. That's what fans care about, wins and losses, and that's it. So, lucky for Kirby Smart, I guess the media felt the same way.
Believe me, Chris, I covered 3 different programs in the SEC for 7 years and went to news conferences every week. I was at the news conferences every week, and all 3 of those programs were on NCAA probation at some point during those 7 years. So I had my fill of covering the news and having to ask those kind of questions in those interviews of those coaches. So no question about that. Okay, let's get to Shane Beamer, because you can almost categorize these coaches on different levels. Nick Saban's on a whole new level, different level, Kirby Smart. And then you've got your other end of the spectrum, like the new guy on the block, or maybe a year in and on shaky ground, Billy Napier, Eli Drinkwitz to a certain extent, those guys. Then you've got Shane Beamer in a good place, along with Josh Heupel, where they haven't established themselves, but the early returns are really good. And people want to talk to him. People want to hear from him.
And what they lack in cachet or sort of their reputation, or I shouldn't say reputation, what they lack in length of their tenure, they make up for their charisma and their energy and the excitement that they bring to the podium. Speaking specifically on Shane Beamer, and I thought it was more the same today from Coach Beamer. You can tell he's confident in his football team. He's confident in the direction they're going. He's confident in the recruiting. I think he also acknowledged the question marks that South Carolina has going into the season. He mentioned, Mark, 38 new scholarship players from the last time this team took the field in a regular season against Clemson to now. And he also mentioned that true freshmen are going to play at every single position, right? And that really makes sense when you look at South Carolina. They're one of the lowest offensively and defensively when it comes to returning production or lack thereof. So, it's a South Carolina football team that, while they've got key pieces returning in Spencer Rattler, Juice Wells, Nick Emawari on the defensive side, they're going to be relying on a lot of young guys and a lot of new guys to step up and emerge immediately and become big-time contributors, not just role players, but big-time contributors on this football team. But again, outside of that, I think Shane Beamer, he does such a great job of using the podium to continue to sell his program, highlight all the positive and the great things they're doing. He did that yet again today.
Chris, you started this out by highlighting what it's all about, and that's the student athlete and getting an opportunity to present themselves and really hone their skills. And I know that Kirby Smart said this about Brock Bowers, that, hey, I wanted to push him out there to say, hey, this is something that you need to work on to be good at. Anybody else besides KJ Jefferson, you mentioned your time with him, that really impressed you, whether it was from the standpoint of a certain answer or response they had, or just a presence and a comfort level with the media?
Well, I will say all three of South Carolina's guys, and I'm really not trying to sound biased, but I thought all three did really well. Spencer Rattler, I think even in the face of some tough questions he got today, I know our good friend SEC Mike, who I see across the way at Radio Row, he asked Rattler about, hey, I had you ranked 9th on my quarterbacks list. What do you think about that? And he said that he actually answered it in a really professional manner and gave the PC answer and the answer that he probably should give. And I thought he did a great job today handling all of that and all the hoopla that comes with SEC Media Days. And then, of course, Kai Kroger, your punter, Tonka Hemingway, your defensive line, those two guys were truly a delight. Again, you mentioned KJ Jefferson. I love my conversations with him. Rocket Sanders was great for Arkansas as well. He was really, really a treat to talk to. Outside of that, the names escape me, so please forgive me, but there were a couple of guys. I thought the Kentucky guys did a great job of representing UK. I thought the Missouri guys did a really good job, and they all did a good job. Florida guys did a good job. Ricky Pearsall was a great conversation, great interview, but I wasn't able to get to every single team and all the players. So I don't want to single it out and say that some did a bad job. They all did great. Kool-Aid McKinstry had the chain rocking. That was really cool. And hearing the Alabama guys talk about expectations and just talk about the standard for Alabama, that was really neat to hear. And then of course Georgia with Brock Bowers. I mean, seeing the best tight end in all of college football in the flesh is a neat thing as well. So I think all the student athletes did really well, and that's what you'd expect from guys that come to this event and that coaches choose. But especially getting to talk to a guy like KJ Jefferson one-on-one is a really neat thing, right? A guy that we all regard as the best quarterback in the SEC.
It is so funny that you bring up that conversation between your guy, SEC Mike, and Spencer Rattler, because you had, prior to that, talked about the intimidation factor of being in the same room with some of these coaches that you've been watching for a long time and having to ask, or being possibly presented with a tough response to a question. It brought back a few memories to me of being taken off guard a few times. So I got to credit your guy, SEC Mike, with the response of saying, hey, I rated you 9th in the conference. What's your response to that? Because it brought back a couple times where I had players that heard through the grapevine or saw on television what I had to say and were like, challenge me on it. This only happened a couple times, but to say, hey, you said our secondary was awful, or you picked us 5th in the East, or whatever it was, and that is a funny response. One last take from you, Chris, before we let you go. Anything else you want to leave us with?
Yeah, but I'll say this again. I want to go back to speaking on the event and just how special it was. I know for the media guys who have been doing this quite a while, 15, 20 years, and it's one of those things. I heard somebody say this is the longest week of the year for me, and I understand how it can be, because it's a lot of coaches, it's a lot of players, and I know me even as well. Like, we're all just so ready to spot the damn ball, whether that even be fall camp, but of course kickoff and get to the season, because there's only so much you can say. There's a reason that HBC labeled it talking season. But again, just the opportunity to share the floor with so many talented creators and collaborate with people with content, and again, meeting people, and obviously you and I have got to link up at some point, but meeting people that I've had on the show numerous times, or just met a couple of weeks ago, or just have done work with, and getting to meet them in person, shake their hand. It takes the relationship to another level, and then also meeting new people as well. And, these are relationships that'll last a lifetime. And, to go from, we're content creators who have collabed to considering these people friends, it's just a cool thing. It's a neat thing, man. We all love this sport. We all love college football. We all love college athletics, and we all share that. And so again, to be in a room with the best of the best, and to feel like you belong as well. And I'll just be frank with you, man. I mean, it's one thing to come to an event like this when you're a part of an affiliate, you're part of a entity, but we started from zero, built this thing up to the point we are now, and we earned our way here, and it feels good to say that. And I feel like we took advantage of it. And like I said, I couldn't imagine the week going any better than it did.
Chris Phillips, the Spurs Up Show, the Daily Crow. Chris, we want to make sure that everyone knows where to find you and the best route there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're at the Spurs Up Show on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. wherever you get your content at the Spurs Up Show. The Daily Crow is our live show, which airs noon to 3 Eastern time, Monday through Friday, exclusively on YouTube. And of course, in our second hour of that show, every single day, we have a guest. And of course, you, Mark Rogers, are our Monday guest. So I'm looking forward to chatting with you on Monday and getting your perspective on everything SEC Media Days. Of course, the podcast can be found at the Spurs Up Show on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And so the Spurs Up Show, anywhere where you can look. And Mark, I appreciate the opportunity to chat about SEC Media Days.
No, you've been running around like a madman. Appreciate you stopping for us, Chris. Appreciate it. Safe travels back home.
Mark, we'll talk soon. Appreciate
Chris Phillips, the Spurs Up Show, and also the Daily Crow. And as Chris had mentioned there, Chris has been kind enough to invite me with a standing offer. Each and every Monday, I jump on board with Chris on the Spurs Up Show there on his platform. That's every Monday at 1:15 Eastern. Appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. Get yourself a friend or two or 50 and bring them in. And again, I had to chuckle because that so much reminded me of something that I have not thought about for years and years and years and years and years. 20, 25 years ago, interviewing these players every Monday and Tuesday it was Ole Miss and Alabama on Monday, and it was Mississippi State on Tuesday. I still remember that. And you'd interview the head coaches. They'd speak from the podium, and then they would be available for one-on-one interviews, and then interview the players. And typically you would put in requests for what players you wanted to speak with each week. And there were a few times I got called out, and it was kind of stunning or shocking, or that's overstated. It was just a little abrupt at the time when you have a player who's sitting across from you, and maybe he's a Alabama defensive lineman, and they bring up, "Hey, I heard that you said our pass rush was awful," or something like that, and it's just funny. That only happened a couple times because being a sports guy on the news, I wasn't actually delivering commentary on a regular basis, but I certainly did frequently, we will say. We've got a great lineup here. Again, we just heard from Chris Phillips at the Spurs Up Show covering South Carolina football. We've got Kevin McGuffey on the docket from Last Word on College Football to talk Kentucky Blue. Evie Van Pelt, one of our favorites, Ole Miss Evie, very obviously, to talk about the Rebels. High Top Sports stopping by, as well as Charlie Burris, A to Z Sports, the Big Orange podcast. We brought in our set designer today, so we made sure that was in well and working order, top to bottom, completely SEC. And when we had a miss here, we bring in, of course, the SEC member of 2024, the Oklahoma Sooners. Jason and Watkins and myself get together every Wednesday to talk Oklahoma football. Check out that live stream each and every Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. Central Time. Look forward to your comments and questions. We have dropped the live link in the chat, so you can join us here at the Voice of College Football. Give me a call if you want to talk SEC Media Days or anything on the docket concerning college football. And maybe I'll share a story from my Big Ten credentials debacle. All right, from the top, LFG coming in with like number 2. Charisse, good to see you. Tennessee man, hang in there. We've got the Vols coverage coming up with Charlie Burris from Big Orange Podcast. Tennessee man, best team in the country. Could be. Charisse, of course, repping the Buckeyes. We've got some Pitt representation in the room. Nice to see. Hail to Pitt, Peninsula P. Dallas says, "Oh, what will CKS do this season without?" Where are we going with this? I can't even go through all of that. All right. Caleb will win his second Heisman. Fight on. We got Sean in here representing Georgia football. Okay, I'll tell the story since there's not much going on and nobody's calling the show right now, and we're still waiting on our other guests. We've got 4 other guests representing the SEC. So this is quite amusing. And it got me pissed off at the same time. Amusing and pissed me off. Probably will just amuse you. So it hit me sometime early last week, and I had a few people suggest or encourage me to go to Big Ten Media Days. And as I just mentioned, I covered SEC Media Days in person for 7 consecutive years. The American Conference was close for 3 or 4 years, so I went to the American Conference Media Days here recently. Okay, story time must wait. I believe we've got another guest on the line. We will see if our guy is able to connect. I think we're ready. Charlie, you out there?
I think so. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. We can hear you clearly. We cannot see anything but black.
It says it has camera access. Let me see if I can turn it off, turn it back on.
If not, we're okay.
Well, there's my face there. That's sort of what I look like.
Well, we will go this route. That's a cleaned up Charlie Burris right there.
Yeah.
Looking good.
That's the one good photo of me. I had to use it.
Well, Charlie, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So, in terms of SEC Media Days, I was not able to see Josh Heupel. I've not seen much of anything here in the last couple of days, but Josh Heupel's appearance there at SEC Media Days, what were your major takeaways?
For the most part, and I would say thankfully, it was pretty boilerplate. I think he, for some reason, it was sort of front loaded with questions about Oklahoma, which is interesting. I guess people really want to play on that. You know, he's sort of a son of Oklahoma, played there, won a national championship there. What do they think about? What did he think about them coming to the league? And to me, that's kind of uninteresting. But if people want to ask that question, now they're coming into the SEC. But there was that. But on the whole, he got asked about Joe Milton a ton. Obviously, you're going from a guy that nearly won the Heisman or was a Heisman finalist to somebody new, and you're always going to get a lot of questions about that and his offense in general. Some about his defense, but I think the thing that people are probably interested in, given what happened in the last couple of weeks, the NCAA ruling, and he was very positive about that, which makes a ton of sense, I think, because now that's finally behind them. But yeah, it was, I would say, generally uneventful, and I consider that a good thing. You don't want to have a scandal at SEC Media Days.
Charlie, the one component of the NCAA ruling that I thought was somewhat unique, and the NCAA has been moving in this direction, and for as much grief as they take from myself and others, and rightfully so, that there's been an issue for a long, long time concerning punishing the wrong people. Most of the perpetrators obviously flee. They're gone. They've been fired. They've left. They've gone on to the NFL. They're at another school, whatever the case might be. And for years and years and years and decades, the NCAA would just boilerplate penalize the school and all the remains, and it was never fair. They have taken steps in recent cases to try to track down those people if they're at other schools, number one. Number two, do as little penalizing of the current players and staff. And that such is the case with the large penalty financially, but not taking away the postseason play. So overall, when you take into consideration the fine, the scholarship reductions, the official visits, a lot of the recruiting benefits taken away, but not touching postseason play, how do you feel about the rulings?
If I have to think about it in the context of giving the NCAA legitimacy, I thought the rulings were fine. I would say probably, paying $8 million for handing out $60,000 in cash is probably stupid. But if that's the pound of flesh they have to take, whatever. Tennessee has the money. Let's be honest. But outside of that, I mean, the loss of scholarships, ultimately, it's just not going to hurt that bad. The loss in visits from recruits is probably the most hurtful part of all of that. But even that, I mean, it's not going to be devastating. And so overall, I know there were a lot of opposing fans that thought, oh, Tennessee got off easy for all of the hundreds of violations and blah, 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 blah. You know, Pat 40 and the national media crew, they were getting their panties up in a wad and just really couldn't. They were beside themselves, couldn't believe it. But ultimately, I mean, my take overall, you know, the punishment, you think about it whatever you want, but why are we still continuing? Like it's the NIL era. Why are we still continuing to give the NCAA this? Oh, they should have done this. They should have done nothing. Is what they should have done. The Tennessee should pay the players that play football for them and make millions of dollars for the university. So it should have done. And so that I kind of have that take on it, that I think a lot of people they're coming over to my side finally now that NIL has entered the picture and all these things. Folks like me, that crowd is getting a lot bigger. But yeah, I mean, if I have to speak on my thoughts on those rulings, yeah, I think it's fine. And really, my take at the end of that is thank God it's over. Thank goodness that's all behind the scene, because I think if Josh Heupel can do what he's done with that cloud hanging over the program, I mean, what can he do now? You know, that's sort of where I'm at.
So I take it you're of the thought, based on that let's say if it was discovered that any particular person had possession of and use of marijuana before it was legalized somewhere, and this was found out after the fact, that we shouldn't be going back and penalizing them for breaking the law prior to the legalization. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, not to get political there, but I definitely agree. I mean, what are we doing? The things that Jeremy Pruitt did, more or less, are legal now. He could have easily worked within the NIL framework to get these kids what they were asking for, what he wanted to give them now, and probably easily gotten away with it. Well, I say that from everything that was in the reporting that came out, it seemed like Jeremy Pruitt really didn't have two brain cells to rub together, and so he may have had trouble no matter what happened. but regardless, that the whole thing is silly at this point. I mean, one of the most fascinating things that I'm not sure really made it into the national scene as far as the whole Tennessee NCAA punishment went, is that the Attorney General for the state of Tennessee intervened on the bowl ban, where basically he supposedly, according to the records that were uncovered by the News Sentinel, the Attorney General for the state of Tennessee wrote a letter to the NCAA saying, you will not give Tennessee a bowl ban because that's against state law, because Tennessee has passed a law about NIL at state level. And when you have things like that going on, like the NCAA at this point, they're the bad guys. Everyone's like, Tennessee got off easy. I can't believe they did everything that they did. And say, no, the NCAA is the bad guy. The NCAA is the one that doesn't want kids to get paid, even though they're making millions of dollars for these schools and yada, yada, yada. I mean, I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole, but I think everybody knows sort of how I feel when I say that. Like it's just so silly at this point. Like, what are we doing still giving the NCAA the time of day? Cut these guys out. And I said this on my own show this past week. I hope this punishment for Tennessee is the last big punishment from the NCAA. I hope this is the end for them being able to levy anything like that on anybody. I don't want to. Yeah, we all know that Alabama's cheating. Everybody likes to say, oh, well, Saban, he's not getting all those players for free. That's true. And you can go on a witch hunt for the stuff that Nick Saban has done, but I would rather just the NCAA go away and just for forever as far as college football is concerned. But maybe that is just me. Maybe I'm extreme. I know not everybody agrees with me, but that's just how it all makes me feel, I guess.
I would agree with you I would completely agree with you if, in fact, there was an NIL system in place or an NIL exchange of money. Then that was just gifted money. That wasn't in the form of NIL.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, although you can't know what you didn't know would exist. I guess it's like he couldn't have done it because it wasn't a thing at the time. And I have to assume that if NIL had existed, Pruitt would have worked within that framework. But like I said, honestly, who knows with sort of the stuff we've learned about that guy at this point. But it, yeah, it's just it feels a lot like hindsight 2020. Now that it's all over and NIL's in place and all of these changes have been made, it just feels like you're looking back and sniping at somebody for doing something that's now legal, and like that just seems stupid. But I regardless of all of that, from what Heupel said today, I think they're super happy that it's over. They can't have, Georgia can't go out there and recruit against them saying, oh, you don't even know what the NCAA is going to do to Tennessee if you go there. And it may already be paying dividends. Tennessee got one of the best wide receivers in America to commit last night. And so I think it's, regardless of what you think about the NCAA, it's a good page to turn, and I'm glad it's over for Tennessee.
Charlie, how confident are you that Joe Milton's going to run this offense nearly as well, if not as well as Hendon Hooker?
I put my confidence at a 7. He's grown a ton, and it was so obvious in that Orange Bowl. And the kid in his time at Tennessee has yet to throw an interception. And he's played at this point a pretty fair amount. Obviously started the Orange Bowl, won the Orange Bowl for Tennessee, started the Vandy game, won the Vandy game. And he's now going on a number of years of experience in Josh Heupel's system. And it's a system that's kind of quarterbacks, but it's a system that takes a lot of sort of feel and flow and learning exactly when to do what and how to do the way that things unfold is just different from your typical offense. Even if it's something that is made to be easy on quarterbacks, you still have to know how to run it. And I think if he takes the steps that it seems like he was working toward near the end of this past season, I mean, the sky's the limit. I think it's very legitimate that he's kind of in the preseason Heisman talk. And I see the comment there from Terrence. Well, he beat Vandy. Did you? Terrence clearly didn't hear the other team that I said. Just the ACC champion from last year, Clemson. Oh, he only beat them too. No big deal there. I'm sure Terrence's team, beat a lot of great teams too. But I have confidence in Joe Milton. I will say, the only thing that scares me is that I think people are super eager to see Nico Iamaleava play, and so I think if anything seriously goes wrong in any games, that people are going to be calling for the backup real quick. They want to see what happens with the superstar 5-star guy that they got coming in. But no, I think Joe Milton, barring injury, is going to play the full season from what I've seen, and probably have a good season at that.
And find better defensive play because these guys have been together a year, because there are some really young players that were recruited under Heupel that are really good and may show something, a combination of those things, possibly.
Oh yeah. The receiving core is all returning guys at least for as far as starters are concerned. You definitely have some fresh talent that are coming in. The running backs are all returning. The thing that is potentially a little dicey is the offensive line. You're replacing a guy who was arguably the best offensive line in the SEC last season, in Darnell Wright. And that is certainly a huge consideration. But your center is a returning veteran. Your left tackle is a returning veteran. Your other tackle is a guy that's played college football. Well, I guess that your offensive line is not set yet, but you have a transfer from Texas. You have other transfers that have come from other places and played a decent amount of football. So I feel.
I'm sorry, Charlie. I probably wasn't clear. I said defense.
Defense. Sorry,
defense. Because
sorry. I completely
yeah.
I misheard you there. That's apologies. Yeah, I mean, and the defense theoretically should take a step forward. They have some solid young guys coming in, but I mean, you had Amari Thomas there today. That's a good veteran. I think you have guys like Wesley Walker, who at least to me, I'm not sure he got the playing time he probably deserved last season, and I think he is going to get it this coming season. Joe Milton was asked today at Media Days to kind of list off some of the guys that he thinks have taken steps on defense, and he named off a bunch of dudes that are returning guys that he's seen. I think, there was Kamal Haddon. He mentioned Christian Charles. He mentioned just a number of dudes that are on that defense that he thinks have kind of grown. And I think he's right. And I think that defense, it was much maligned at points last season. And so in some sense, you can only sort of go up from there. But they had some really excellent performances too. They completely shut down Kentucky. Not that offense was anything special necessarily, but completely shut down Kentucky. Did a good job shutting down Kate Klubnik in the Orange Bowl against Clemson. Had their moments outside of sort of the embarrassment that was the South Carolina game and things like that. And so I think that they have the potential to take a step forward, and you work in some of the younger guys too, and it's a pretty solid set of dudes. And if you can have 80% of what you had on offense last year, and then have 115% of what you had on defense last year, you're meeting pretty close to where you're at, right? So hopefully they can do that, but we're gonna have to see, because it's a lot of unknowns on that defense, even with a number of returning guys.
Charlie, tell us what people are going to find at Big Orange Podcast.
Big Orange Podcast every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on YouTube. We live stream just like this at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on the A to Z Sports Nashville YouTube channel. So for any Tennessee fans that want more Tennessee content, come over, hang out with us. We love reacting to everybody's comments. I mean, I did it on this show, so I definitely do it on my own show, and that's where you can find us every week. And then during the season, I do a show with former Vols quarterback Jonathan Crompton on game days. We do it at halftime and post game of every Tennessee football game, and you'll find me there too.
Very cool. Charlie, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for stopping by, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invite as always, Mark.
Our guy, Charlie Burris, Big Orange Podcast. Check it out, A to Z Sports. We keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We're going to check in with our guy, Kevin McGuffey from Last Word on College Football on Kentucky Big Blue. Kevin, how are you?
I'm doing good, Mark. How are you doing? It's good to be on and talking to you again. So I see.
You get the
Nice.
center spot.
Wow. I feel honored. I think that might be a first. So what do you want to talk about? Just kidding.
Well, I have not had a chance to hear from Mark Stoops. I've not checked out his time at the podium or any of the side sessions there. So was there anything in particular that stood out to you about what Mr. Stoops had to say?
From my standpoint, Stoops was more like the Mark Stoops that we've seen in years past. Kind of the whole, people are sleeping on us. We're going to be a team to watch, all of that. Last year was kind of that outlier because of the success from 2021. Kentucky was, picked high in the SEC, and there was some expectations. And let's be honest, they didn't quite meet those expectations. The biggest things that he talked about were consistency and just, fundamental football things that Stoops has preached for 11 years now. And you think about it, he's now, He's the second longest tenured coach in the SEC. And I think it's like sixth in the nation or something like that. Stability, consistency, a lot of those things that were kind of missing, honestly, lacking in places last year, getting back to basics here in 2023. And he talked a lot about Liam Cohen coming back as offensive coordinator, the great success they had, obviously, in 2021. Glowing praises for Brad White, defensive coordinator. Kentucky's defense was like fifth or sixth, I think, in the SEC last year. We're folks in Lexington. I say we, myself included. We're lucky that I think he's still here. I'm surprised. I wouldn't be surprised maybe in the next couple of years if you don't see him taking the John Summerall route and going, steam in the Sun Belt and Conference USA school as a, starting his head coaching career. And then he also talked a lot about special teams from last year and quite frankly, what a disaster it was. And, to that end, he hired Jay Boulware to come in and help fix the special teams. You think about the Ole Miss game. Basically, special teams cost them that game. A couple other times last year. So he just kind of hit on a lot of different things. Also talked about Devin Leary, how excited he is to have him playing with Kentucky, pairing him with Liam Cohen, and that offense that worked so well 2 years ago. And then Kentucky has arguably, in my opinion, one of the best sets of wide receivers in the league with Dane Key, Barrion Brown, the two of them with Leary. It was, but overall, it was kind of the Mark Stoops that you kind of expect. It's funny. Somebody made the comment. You think about Mark Stoops from year one in 2013 and his first media days to this year. The difference. Much more calm, and not that he gets was fired up, complaining, yelling, whatever. But you could just tell somebody who's done this for a long time now and kind of knows what to expect. But that was kind of a general overview of a lot of the things that I took from it. Basically, just preaching consistency, fundamental football, special teams got to get better, and that's kind of some of the keys for this upcoming season.
Yeah, you mentioned Nick Saban. Obviously, he's in a class all by himself. But just talking about longevity in the league, as you mentioned, Mark Stoops at number 2. This would be Kirby Smart's 8th season, I believe, at Georgia. Really, every other stop in the SEC, all you have to do is go back 2 or 3 years. And Elijah Drinkwitz wasn't at Missouri. It was Barry Odom. It was Wilt Muschamp at South Carolina. It was Jeremy Pruitt at Tennessee. It was a different coach at Ole Miss. It was Matt Luke. It was Ed Ogeron. At every other stop, Auburn, Arkansas, all different coaches. So to last in this league is not a given by any stretch. And Mark Stoops has, I think the success is because of how good he is, but it's also Kentucky's staying with him, and you build that stability and you have that steadiness there year to year.
Oh, absolutely. And for a lot of the blame that UK athletic director Mitch Barnhart gets on a lot of things, one thing that he stayed with Stoops. You and I have talked about this before. Stoops is 2 games into his 4th season at Kentucky. He was 12-26, and not too many people would have stuck with him. And you think about what's happened since then: 7 straight bowl games, had won 5 in a row until the Iowa game that we don't want to talk about from this past year. But it goes to what you're talking about, the consistency. And one of the comments that he made, Stoops made, was that, we're to the point now where just winning, we shouldn't be happy just winning 7 or 8 games. We've got the consistency. Now it's time to try to take that step forward, whether it's competing and beating Georgia, basically, saying that the goal now is Atlanta, making it to the SEC championship game. Now, obviously, Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs and Tennessee going to have a lot to say about that this year, especially. But that's one of those things. You're at this point now, and you and I have been talking for years. When you think about what the program was like when he started in 2013 after the debacle that was the year before with Joker Phillips and where they are now. I mean, it's amazing. Oh, and one more thing I want to throw out real quick. If for those who may not remember, about this point last year was the whole football school, basketball school dust up thing that happened with him and Coach Calipari. So, and I know one of the people, Octavius Oxendine, one of the defensive linemen, somebody asked him about that at one part of the media days, and he gave a great answer. He said, we're in everything school. Said, our volleyball team just won a national championship a couple years ago. Soccer team's been good, tennis team. So that, we're just in everything school. But it is kind of interesting that it's been a year since all of that that little blow up, for lack of a better term, started. It happened around media days last year. So
Yeah, I had forgotten about that. That was a whole lot of fun. Yes.
yeah, right.
So
Yeah,
Kevin,
lots of press on that, and not in a good way necessarily.
So good press about Devin Leary coming in. So between he and these wide receivers, would you categorize the change in offense as just simply being, okay, we're recognizing that we've got another most likely future NFL quarterback and maybe the best wide receiver core that we've had under Mark Stoops and going way back before that even. So we're just going to call more passing plays. The run pass ratio is going to go more pass than run, or we're going to see a bit of a different offense.
See, I think it's more what you saw in 2021. I mean, Stoops still preaches ball control, and I would be remiss not to throw out Ray Davis's name, the Vanderbilt transfer. He's the heir apparent now at running back. Had a huge game against Kentucky last year when Vandy broke that long losing streak in the SEC. I think you're still going to see a lot of that short passing game. I think you're going to see passes, to Davis, some of the backs coming out of the backfield, and the tight ends are really strong on this team. I don't think you're going to see a wide open, air raid type offense that for many years Kentucky fans always had clamored for. I don't see that happening. I think if you go back and watch what you saw a lot in 2021 is what you're going to see this year, and hopefully with similar success. Like I said, ball control, and try to keep the opposing teams off the field. So that's that's kind of Stoops' that ball control fundamental smash mouth football has always been his hallmark, and I don't think they're not going to totally change what brought him to the dance, basically, to use a cliche there.
Because Stoops has been there for so long and George has been so good for so long and really has been the best team in the division since 2017, since Kirby Smart's second season, the guys like Shane Beamer, Josh Heupel that are doing really nice jobs, but they're just getting started. They're still fresh.
Right.
That there's a level of frustration there, maybe coaching in that division, and that might be present for Mark Stoops more than anybody else because he's had to deal with it the longest. That
right.
Man, this is just a juggernaut that we have to face and try to fight
Mm-hmm.
through.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And thing, Kentucky, trying to do my math real quick. I think 2009 is the last time Kentucky won against Georgia. They actually beat them down in Athens. And 2006 here in Lexington is the last time Kentucky won. So Kentucky's had and you go back to the game last year, Kentucky held that team to 16 points. If you remember, it was a one-score game most of the way. Kentucky lost 16-6. And then you think about, the kind of numbers that Georgia put up in the especially the championship game. But I can see the frustration. Kentucky's had. I wouldn't say they've had their chances. I mean, last year was probably about as good a chance, as close a game as they played, because a lot of those games have been blowouts. But I could definitely see that frustration. When is this going to happen? And of course, unfortunately, as Kentucky fans, we're used to long. I don't want to say used to, but we're very well with losing streaks. Unfortunately,
conditioned.
Yeah, thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. The long losing streak to Tennessee, the long losing streak to Florida, which now Kentucky has flipped that script, winning, like three out of the last 5 against Florida. So, their frustration is there. You got to think at some point they're going to break through. I don't know that it'll be this year because, you got to go down to Athens, and that's a tough task on anybody. But to answer the question on the screen, Kentucky's offensive line, I think, is going to be much better. That was honestly one of the biggest problems last year. You think about it, Kentucky's had the big blue wall, as we've called it for years now, coined by the late John Schlarman. And for whatever reason, last year's team just the offensive line does not it just didn't click. You go back and watch those games. Levis is running for his life, in a lot of those games. And
that Tennessee game in particular was
yeah. As the guy who was on before me, I was backstage listening, and you just kind of have to sit there and take it, because that's exactly what happened last year. I mean, I really thought Kentucky had a chance to possibly win that game, and they just, to use a Stoops term, it was just a full systems failure. But the offensive line, Kentucky went out in the offseason. They brought in Cortland Ford from USC, Marcus Cox from Northern Illinois, Tanner Bowles, formerly of Alabama. I think two of those guys, Ford and Cox, are going to be two of your starters. And we, along with another Cox, Eli Cox, and then Kenneth Horsley's back for another year. I think the offensive line is going to be really, really good. I think it's going to be more along the lines of what Kentucky fans have grown accustomed to over the last few years with that big blue wall.
According to our friend Phil Steele, who, by the way, folks, programming note, will be on next Friday here at the Voice of College Football. So we'll have Phil Steele. We just got that confirmed a few hours ago. Cool. 4 starters back along the Kentucky offensive line. 125 career starts. And that's a number I look at constantly with these teams. And that's a high number, 125 career starts.
Right.
And Phil Steele calls it, he's predicting it to be the most improved offensive line in the SEC.
Who am I to argue with Phil Steele, right? No, I think you're exactly right. And then another name I didn't mention was Jagger Burton. Like I said, I think people are going to, UK fans are going to be pleasantly, people around the nation are going to be pleasantly surprised, and UK fans are just going to be excited to see what's in tow for this season. So I think 8 wins. I said 8-4. I think the last time I was on with you, I'm still towing that line right now, 8-4 / 9-3 possibly, but. And another probably Florida Bowl game. So,
Kevin, before you answer the question from our buddy here, Jackson Johnson, I'll stage it this way because he's asking about having the upper hand about against Florida, and we've got a collection of college football fans, obviously here from all over the country, following different teams. So Kevin has had to grow up throughout his entire life as a Kentucky football fan, getting beaten down and curb stomped by Florida. The one streak was what, 1984 to 5 years ago, right?
Yeah, 31 games from 87 to 2017. So
yeah.
Kentucky won in 86 in Lexington, and then finally broke the streak in 2018 down in the Swamp. So they won 2018, should have won in 2019. Another game with special team errors, but
and that was when Kyle Trask came off the bench and really
that was exactly replaced Felipe Franks, and that was for many years has been Kentucky's kryptonite, the backup quarterback. So and then now Kentucky's won back-to-back games against Florida for the first time since I believe it's 1976 and 77 maybe, but it's been it's been a long time. So, but it is really weird that. When I talked, David Waters, who does such an awesome job with Florida, it was an odd feeling that at this point right now, Kentucky. This is when we talked last year. We haven't talked this year yet, but that Kentucky is actually going into a Florida game feeling they're going to win, and that's something you would have never heard of in the past. And I have no doubt that Billy Napier is going to get that program right back. At the top of the SEC, it may take another
the way he's
year.
Recruiting.
Yeah, the way he's recruiting, absolutely. That they'll be back. They're not going to be at the bottom of the league, or I say 5th place. That's where to throw in a little plug here. We did to tie in with Media Days. We did at Last Word. We did this last year too. We did our own SEC picks for East and West and overall champion. So you can go to Last Word on College Football and check that out. No surprise, Georgia number 1, Tennessee was 2, South Carolina was 3. Kentucky came in 4th in our poll. I had them at 3rd. Florida was 5th, Missouri 6th, and Vandy was 7th. And but surprisingly, Vandy did not get all of the last place votes. Missouri actually got 4 last place votes in our poll. So, like I said, I picked Kentucky 3rd. There was one writer who picked Kentucky 6th, and I just shook my head at that. I just tallied the votes and counted them up. So, in the West, real quick, LSU and Auburn tied. They had the same number of votes. I know I'm kind of spoiling the article, but still go check it out anyway. So it's good stuff. And then we had, I think, A&M, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Auburn at the bottom. Now, I might have gotten those last couple. It could have been Auburn, Mississippi State, or Mississippi State, Auburn. But anyway, but yeah.
I, for one, am starting to question why Eli Drinkwitz is not on the hot seat. And maybe internally he is, but he's not delivered a winning season. And Barry Odom had a better record than he does right now.
Right.
And I don't know if they extended him. I shouldn't say. I know Clark Lee got extended here in the last week at Vanderbilt. But I'm looking at the ledger on Kentucky and Florida, the games the last 2 years, of which, as soon as I see the scores, I remember them well. Kentucky was a touchdown underdog in both of those games. So they won those 2 against Florida. And the other thing that comes to mind, Kevin, is you keep when you bring up some type of high mark in Kentucky football, it seems like 1976, 1977 come up a lot. Those 2 years come up a lot. I posted a video recently, and this is a fun exercise. I fill in the blank after this statement. Is this the year blank? And you just brought up Kentucky's not defeated Georgia since 2009, at home since 2006. So, for example, that would be, is this the year Kentucky beats Georgia for the first time since 2009? And then also in looking at if we're going to really project a huge season for Kentucky, of course, they somewhat won the SEC in 1977. They were on probation.
Right.
Did not technically win the league, but finished undefeated in the conference. Had a really big season. They beat Penn State that year, who finished in the top 3 or 4 in the country. But you got to go back to 1950 officially.
Right. And then 76, they're kind of considered co-champions. If you go back, through the, I don't remember. I think it was Mississippi State. Somebody who had tied ended up on probation. Of course, Kentucky was on probation in 77. That's one of the big unfortunate what ifs with Kentucky football. What could that team, what kind of bowl game could that team have gone to? With basically you had Derek Ramsey was quarterback. Art Still was the big defensive player. They said Kentucky was 10-1. The only loss that year was at Baylor. So in that season. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go out on that limb and say this year Kentucky beats Georgia, but of course Kentucky also plays Alabama this year too, who they haven't beaten since 1997. And I always like to tell the story. I was at that game and may or may not have run out on the field there at Commonwealth Stadium in my much younger days, and may have run out on the field after that game, but
may have. There would be no photography or video evidence of that.
Right.
Not back in those days.
Yeah. 1997. I don't think, thankfully, no one had cell phone cameras, anything like that. So, which is a good thing. So.
Well, Kevin, we appreciate you stopping by as always. We want to make sure everybody knows to head on over to lastwordoncollegefootball.com, where Kevin does some fine work, and the rest of the staff there, Tony Siracusa and company there at Last Word on College Football. They've always been extremely good to me. Are those bowl projections, have they been solidified for this year?
Yeah, I actually, they've been out for a little while. I missed communicating with you, I think, when they came out. But yeah, I did have them done. I'll probably do an updated one before the season starts. But
As soon as you do an updated one, we'll have you on and we'll go
Okay.
live and we'll post your bowl projections and we
Nice.
can look
Okay.
at those.
Yeah, I think it was a big shock. It was Georgia. I'm trying to remember the top four. Georgia, Ohio State. I'm drawing a blank now, but basically the four teams you would probably expect to be there. So I did not have Alabama in there. I know that.
Michigan?
And yes, had Michigan. I had Georgia,
Clemson?
Michigan, Ohio State, and no, it wasn't Clemson.
USC? Florida State?
Might have been. Let me. You know what?
LSU?
Hold on. Let's.
I bet I've hit. There's only so many options, unfortunately. I wish there were more. Texas is kind of a wild card pick for a lot of people.
Yeah, I know that the people watching right now are like, oh my gosh, is he really trying to look this up? But
I need to go back through my college football playoff preseason prediction and see how accurate I've been through the years. And then people can pile on against me. Although I know of 2 years I had all four. I know 2016
Right.
and another year I had all four. Last year
all right,
was
here
not
we go.
great.
Here we go. We've got Ohio State versus Washington. I had Washington in my top four. So Ohio State versus Washington and Georgia versus Michigan again. So that
Washington.
that was my playoff. So threw a monkey wrench in there with maybe with Washington, but and then Georgia and Ohio State was my my preseason championship game. So
well, I will say that most seasons, I think this has held up the last 3 seasons, there's been a new team in the playoff. So if you're looking for a new team that's never been, well, Washington has been. My bad.
Right.
2016, they were there. Okay.
Yeah. But and then just going through quickly the game that I was most excited about, I thought would be fun. The Peach Bowl got LSU playing Tulane. So Tulane going in as a group of 5, and then LSU as the SEC, basically the SEC champion. But of course, they can't play in the Sugar Bowl because the Sugar Bowl is part of the national championship game this year. It's the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl. So, but that was, like I said, you can go to last word on college football and search bowl projections. Actually, I can send you a link if you'd like. Tag you on
perfect
on social media if you'd like to check it out. So,
absolutely.
But yeah, so that's it was Washington. That was a team I couldn't think of. Was my extra
Washington in the playoff. Okay, yeah. I like it.
It might be a little out of left field, but that's okay. It's it was early June, so we can always dream. So
anybody
if you're a Huskies fan, so
anybody can put Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, and Michigan on a playoff bracket.
Yeah, so. Like I said, I had Alabama. I don't remember. I think it was actually in the Orange Bowl. It was some kind of weird bowl thing. So I have Alabama. I think I had Alabama playing Clemson in the Orange Bowl. So, but so anyway, but yeah, like I said,
Kevin.
Cool. Well, thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Yes, sir, Mark. Thank you for having me on again. It's always great to talk to you. I really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone out in Mark Rogers TV land, as we all know, best college football discussion site. I believe I saw something about it online.
Yeah, some site out there was crazy enough to put us number 1.
Hey,
so as soon as somebody showed that to me, I thought, hey, we got to publicize this. So
right, yeah, I'm not going to disagree with it. So
I actually didn't publicize it. Somebody else put it out there on. Yeah, they showed it to me, but then they tweeted it out, and they're very nice to do that.
Yeah, I remember seeing that, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. And like I said, I don't disagree with it. So
much appreciated, Kevin.
All right, thank you, Mark. We will talk to you soon. Okay,
sounds good. We'll see you. Our guy, Kevin McGuffey, last word on college football. Appreciate Kevin stopping by again. Last word on collegefootball.com. And Kevin, for the last, 4 or 5 years, has been putting together a bowl projection series. And that should be fun. I know bowls don't matter. They don't count. They're exhibition games, but I still like them. I still enjoy the bowl games. We will take your calls here at the Voice of College Football. The link is in the chat. Guess I'm feeling just a little bit better here in the last couple hours after getting a haircut. Got myself a haircut. Feel like a new man. I had started to tell the story about my pursuit of Big Ten media credentials, which a number of people who should know because they receive credentials every year thought that that was a foregone conclusion, that that would be a layup. So this is what happened. And then I will run through your comments, questions. So here's what happened. It was sometime here about 2 weeks ago that I had enough people tell me, Mark, you should go to Big Ten Media Days, because I had not really considered it. And I thought, okay, yeah, it's within driving distance, not a comfortable drive, but it's within driving distance. So we'll go to Big Ten Media Day. Sounds good to me. Let's do it. And so last week, right about this time, maybe earlier in the week, I went on the Big Ten site and filled in the information for credentials. Well, the only thing that it stated on the application form was that we would be communicated to by Monday, July 17th, as to whether we had received the credentials or been denied. So it didn't say that I didn't meet the deadline. So I filled out the application for credentials, and then Monday, July 17th, 2 days ago, 3 days ago, arrived, and I did not hear anything. And then sometime late this morning, there's a number of aspects to this that's amusing. One would be that I was notified just simply, the Big Ten office has reviewed your request, and with the result, thank you for your interest in Big Ten football. The Big Ten office has reviewed your request with this determination. And it just says, Mark Rogers denied. So that sat well with me, as you can imagine. So then what was amusing about it as well is that I included a friend on the credentials because, as you can imagine, trying to navigate the room and chase down people, and it is extremely helpful to have somebody with you to carry equipment and so forth. So I asked my friend to go. And so he was included on the credentials as well. So he contacted me a few hours ago to say, Mark, I received this. So I'm the owner of the channels. I submitted the request. They sent the official rejection notice and the explanation to my friend. And so I thought, did they even really look at this? And I responded by saying something to the effect of, you would be hard pressed to find anyone who knows or covers Big Ten football like we have 61,000 subscribers on our Big Ten channels and main channel, and we know Big Ten football, and we cover Big Ten football. You have made a poor judgment and a bad decision, period. Now, I also posted this on Twitter, and I included this on it was probably Kevin Warren. Yes, a Kevin Warren hire that reviewed it. Exactly. So this gets even more amusing. And again, I go back and forth between amusing and pissed off because I wanted to cover Big Ten Media Days. And we will still cover Big Ten Media Days. We will just do it from afar. So the next portion of this is, again, they send the official rejection notice to my friend. They send me just a one-liner. Why they wouldn't send either the official notice to me or send us the same thing, I have no idea. Daniel, thank you so much for that. The Big Ten is lame for that. So I posted this on Twitter. And so I would greatly appreciate any and all of you to grab this tweet and to like it and retweet it. Let's see, I can send you the link to this tweet. And I will post this in the chat. Peanut Butter Hero, I believe you are getting... Oh, you're talking about the SEC. So we will address the SEC here in just a second. Please like and retweet. So what I am asking for, folks, is a groundswell of support, a grassroots effort. That's what we're all about here anyway at the Voice of College Football, grassroots support. So this is what I sent to the Big Ten on Twitter. The list of individuals more qualified than me to cover your conference is minuscule, if not zero. We have 61,000 subs for our Big Ten channels. I don't even think that that's that important, although it leads to credibility. And I'm not even saying that 61,000 subs is that many. But more importantly, we know what the hell we're talking about. Unlike, and of course, I wasn't going to name any particular people, but the list is too long of people that receive credentials to these events that really don't know. Poor judgment, bad decision. So we ask that you would grab the link that we provided there in the chat. And if you're on Twitter, please retweet and like that. Mike, I'll get to your comment in just a second. I appreciate that. So, and until I get a final rejection. So here was the next step to this. There was a number to the Big Ten office sent to my friend. So I called the number because it said, if you have any questions, here is the name, and I won't recite the name, but the name and the number to call. So I called the Big Ten office, and it asked for, if you don't know the extension, then type in the last name of the person you're trying to reach. I am typing this name in correctly, and it continues to error and say, this is not a valid entry. This is not a valid entry. I'm looking at the name, I'm typing, I'm like, you morons. Yes, it is a valid entry. So I hang up, and I finally just call the front desk, and then I left a message, and we'll see if the Big Ten office gets back to me. I should put them on live when the Big Ten office calls me back, if they call me back. Because the next thing I'm going to let them know is that I was good enough to get credentials with the SEC for 7 years in a row. For 7 years in a row, the SEC was kind enough to give me credentials. And sure, I was working for a CBS station. However, since I've been doing this, the SEC has told me, because I inquired one year, that they would approve credentials for our Voice of College Football at the SEC Media Days. Can you believe that? I feel like telling the Big Ten office, this is why you're not the best football conference in America. Obviously, that has nothing to do with it, but it would be just fun to tell them that. All right. Mike, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for the contribution. Justice for Mark. They're just scared of real journalism. Support Mark everyone, any way you can. And you guys know me. I'm a kind of soul. It's not like I'm a rebel rouser and I'm going to trash the Big Ten. I may do that now if they don't give me credentials. And if I miss the deadline, that's fine. I want to abide by the rules. I will abide by the rules. If they would have, first of all, you shouldn't be able to submit anything after the deadline. Number two, they didn't tell me that was the deadline. They said July 17th was the deadline, and I sent this a good 4, 5, 6 days in advance. So I did have a few people say, it's kind of late. Did you miss the deadline? Well, not according to the application I filled out. So I just really don't understand. And again, we covered this conference really well. Really well. All right. Mike, thank you so much for that. Appreciate that. SEC Dog, appreciate you. Mr. Rogers should be accepted in any conference for media days. Thank you for that. They can't let everyone in. I get it. And I don't know what limit that is. And I don't know if they get 2 more requests than they can accommodate, or they get 100 more requests than they can accommodate. But we do cover college football and cover the Big Ten every freaking day. And again, we don't have a huge channel, but it's not like I'm talking to 82 subscribers. We do have an Iowa channel, a Nebraska channel, Michigan, Ohio State that are doing pretty well. Yes, they had a failure to communicate. Their answering system was not working. Todd says, Mark, you are a Big Ten homer. Well, I hope not. JJ, you cover everything well. Well, thank you for that. Big Ten homer, I try not to be. I hope not. Otherwise, I might be arguing like some of you do that it's the best conference in college football, but I don't do that. SEC Dog, they may have their chosen media people there. In other words, the people that fit whatever BS narrative they want. Yes, we're going to tell the truth. So obviously, I'm not going there to rail on the Big Ten. I don't rail on the Big Ten here very often. I did post a video. Maybe they didn't appreciate if anybody caught wind of it, that said the Big Ten sucks last season at some point. But that's part of the deal. R. Graw, they aren't sports journalists. They're race baiters. So yes. R. Graw, you might have something there. You might have something there. You might have something there. All right, we've got High Top Sports coming on here pretty soon to talk some Florida football. Billy Napier and the crew at Big Ten Media Days. Anything else interesting from you folks? Charisse is going to continue to pile on Michigan for losing to TCU. Oh, college football picks coming in from B2B, Big Ten champs, back-to-back Big Ten champs there. Georgia, Michigan, Florida State, USC. I could see it. Who do we really believe has a legitimate shot? USC does in the Pac-12. Does anyone else? I believe other teams can win that conference, but can they get to the playoff? Utah, Oregon, Washington, Texas, a lot of people like in the Big 12, me included, reluctantly, but as a team, I believe they've got the best team on paper by far. And if they did not play Alabama on the road, it depends how the College Football Playoff Selection Committee views that. Because we know they generally go by record, right? Think about this. And again, for those of you just joining us, we've got a tweet there that I've posted on the screen. And if you would go to my Twitter and check that out and retweet and like that, that would be phenomenal. Has the College Football Playoff Selection Committee selected a team with a worse record over other Power 5 teams with better records. For example, there was a little push there to go with either Alabama or Tennessee over Ohio State, but it didn't happen. Had it happened, there would have been a selection of a 10-2 team over an 11-1 team. So it didn't happen in 22. 21. The 4 seed was Cincinnati. The 3 seed was Michigan. They were the Big Ten champion with 1 loss. So it didn't happen in 21. 20. Now, 20 was a weird year. Everybody played different levels, numbers of games. 2019, it did not happen. You had the 3 undefeated teams and Oklahoma with 1 loss as a Big 12 champion. And they had the next best record. 2018, you had the 3 undefeated teams plus Oklahoma with 1 loss out of the Big 12. You had in 2017, even though Alabama, a lot of people do not believe they should have been selected, they did have an 11-1 record. 2016, the committee went with Ohio State with a better record over Penn State. 2015, there were no teams that were left out that had a better record. 2014, the same thing. So, of course, there have been teams that had the same record that were left out, meaning TCU Baylor versus Ohio State, meaning Ohio State versus the 1-loss teams that made it in 2015. My point is that we have never had a team reach the playoff, be selected to the playoff, that had a worse record than a team that did not make the playoff. And the reason I brought that up is because Texas plays Alabama. And this is where that kind of game can hurt. Of course, if Texas goes out there and gets embarrassed, that's really going to hurt. If they lose a close game to Bama, just like they did last year, is that going to hurt them? I don't think it should, if Alabama turns out to be the kind of team that we expect them to be, at least 10-2. But history has told us through 9 seasons that losses hurt. Hurt to the point that you will not be elevated above a team to which you have a worse record than. Your resume will not be taken into consideration to the point where you will be elevated. And the reason I bring that up with Texas going to Bama is, let's say Texas, let's say they lose another 1-point game against Bama, and Bama's a top 5 to 10 team, and then Texas loses 1 game in the Big 12, and they finish 11-2, and they win the Big 12 championship. They are not going to get the nod based on history over a team with 1 loss. The committee has stayed in line with records, even though they say they go to all this trouble and all this research and investigation to the nth degree. They have never selected a team, meaning all of us could just look at the teams with the best records and select them for the playoff. Now, we would have to break a tie most seasons, but that's what the committee's done. They have selected the teams with the best records every year without fail. So Mike is telling us that history shows that strength of schedule in early weeks matters, such as Ohio State, Oklahoma. Yeah, so 2016, the Ohio State argument over Penn State, of course, was threefold. It was, number one, Ohio State had a better record, 11-1 versus 11-2. Number two, Ohio State played a tough non-conference game and won that game on the road against the top 5 Oklahoma team. Number three, Ohio State played the more difficult of the non-division games in defeating Wisconsin, who went to the Big Ten championship game, and Ohio State did that on the road. Penn State had the obvious argument of we're the Big Ten champion and we won the game head to head. And I'm not making a statement for Ohio State. In fact, I argue for Penn State and did at the time and still do now that Penn State should have been selected for the playoff. But my point is that Ohio State made it because they had a better record, that the committee has gone in order of record every year. Our Graw says, yeah, Penn State were conference champs and beat Ohio State head to head and still were picked. They then got pounded by Clemson. Shadow Bearded, good to see you right here at the Voice of College Football. There have only been 2 playoffs where 3 out of 4 teams were undefeated. 2019. And what, 2020? No. What was the other year? 2019. And three were undefeated. 2018. Yeah, 2018 with Clemson, Alabama, Notre Dame. '16 was the closest. The 2-loss team almost got in. I would also say 2017 Auburn. 2017 Auburn was 10-2. And if they would have won the SEC championship game, they would have been in. So for anyone who thinks that it's impossible for a 2-loss team to make the playoff, all you have to do is look at 2017. Auburn was the number 3 team in the country. They might have been number 2 with 2 losses before they lost the SEC. Mike 3883 tells us UCLA does not play Oregon and Washington. USC could play UCLA in the Pac-12 championship game before going to the Big Ten. That finale at the Rose Bowl with USC and UCLA last year, I think a lot of people forget how close UCLA came to winning that game. DTR threw a pick at midfield. It was 48-45. He threw a pick in USC territory with about 90 seconds left in the game. Otherwise, they were 10 or 15 yards away from a makeable field goal, and they were obviously 40 yards away from winning the game. So with the bowl loss to Pitt, with the loss to USC, and with losing all those games down the stretch, UCLA's season really got tarnished. But man, they were close to making the Pac-12 championship game. So, folks, are you rooting for USC and UCLA to play in the Pac-12 championship game? Or are you rooting for them to get a send-off, a rough send-off to the Big Ten? Likewise, in Texas, Oklahoma, are you rooting for Texas and Oklahoma to play in the Big 12 championship game? Or do you want them to get kicked in the tail on their way to the SEC? Back-to-back Big Ten champions. I'm right there with you. Let's riot. Let's storm the Bastille. All right, folks. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. I believe we'll wrap it up right here. We will have some really good content coming your way. Talk about Big Ten coverage. I'd like to tell the Big Ten how many people out there are covering Minnesota to the point that we did this afternoon, and we will have that video released here pretty soon. We ripped apart the Minnesota offense and defense. And we will be posting those videos here in the next few days. So check out our fall camp previews. We have posted Michigan, Ohio State, Florida State, Oregon, Alabama, and we've got others lined up, Clemson. And like I say, we talked to Minnesota today with our guy, Daniel House from Gophers Guru. Todd, thank you for being here. Everybody else as well. Next live show, please bring a friend or 2 or 50, and let's build the audience here at the Voice of College Football. And we will see you next time. Keep those notifications turned on to know when we go live. And again, if you would, join me on Twitter and please retweet the tweet that I am posting right now in the feed. And folks, we will see you next time right here at the Voice of College Football. Have a good night.